I warned them that the folder labeled Basic Work Files was not a suggestion, but my family treated boundaries like a game they had to win. They were still chuckling about my secrecy when tires screeched on the gravel outside. I watched 4 black SUVs box us in, tactical lights cutting through the curtains, and knew instantly that my mother's curiosity had just cost us our freedom. The time for apologies was over. My name is Luna Cruz, and I was currently watching my life disintegrate through a gap in the sheer curtains of my parents' living room window. The sound that had frozen me in place was not a knock. It was the distinct, aggressive screech of reinforced rubber biting into loose gravel, a noise that did not belong in a quiet cul-de-sac in Cedar Hollow. It was the sound of authority arriving without an invitation. Inside the house, the air was still thick with the smell of my mother's pot roast and the lingering, stale warmth of a family argument that had just ended in laughter. But outside, the world had shifted into a cold, hard spectrum of gray and black. I stood motionless, my hand hovering near the heavy velvet drape, my heart hammering a rhythm that felt entirely too fast for my chest. I did not need to look for long to understand the severity of the situation. There were not 1 or 2 cars. There were between 4 and 6 black SUVs, large and imposing, blocking the entirety of the driveway and spilling out onto the manicured lawn my father was so proud of. They had parked in a formation that I recognized immediately from training videos I hoped I would never have to see enacted in real life. It was a containment pattern. The doors of the vehicles flew open in perfect synchronization, and men poured out. They were not local police. They were not the sheriff's deputies who sometimes rolled through the neighborhood to check on noise complaints. These men wore heavy tactical gear, the kind that absorbed light rather than reflected it. I saw the dull glint of carbines held at the low ready. I saw the distinct shape of breaching tools. I heard the crackle of encrypted radios, a burst of static that cut through the muffled barking of the neighbor's golden retriever. "Luna, what is it?" The voice belonged to my sister, Kendra. It came from the dining room behind me, casual and slightly annoyed, laced with the comfort of someone who believed that the worst thing that could happen on a Saturday night was running out of wine. I could not answer her. My throat had constricted to the size of a pinhole. Only 2 minutes ago, the scene in this house had been aggressively normal. 2 minutes. That was all it took to go from a domestic comedy to a federal tragedy. 2 minutes ago, we were all sitting around the mahogany dining table. My father, Glenn, was at the head, looking flushed and pleased with himself. My mother, Marianne, was stacking plates with the aggressive helpfulness that she used to control every social interaction. My younger brother, Dylan, was scrolling on his phone, and Kendra was pouring herself a second glass of Chardonnay. They were laughing. They were laughing at me. The subject of their amusement was a plain navy blue folder that sat on the sideboard near my purse. I had printed a label for it with a standard label maker, bold black letters on white tape, Basic Work Files. I had chosen those words carefully. I had chosen them because they were boring. I had chosen them because basic implies low value, and work files implies tedious spreadsheets that no one would want to read. I had underestimated the insatiable, suffocating curiosity of the Cruz family. To them, a boundary was not a wall. It was a door that I had rudely locked, and they were entitled to pick it. "I still don't get why you are so jumpy," Dylan had said, smirking without looking up from his screen. "It says Basic Work Files. What is in there? Receipts? Timesheets? You act like you are guarding the nuclear codes." "It is just protocol," I had said, my voice tight. I was trying to keep the tremor out of my hands as I reached for my water glass. "I cannot have work materials out in the open. Please, just leave it alone." "Oh, stop it, Luna," my mother had chimed in, snatching a dirty napkin from in front of me. "You always make everything so dramatic. We are your family. You think we care about your little office reports? We just want to know what you do all day. You are so secretive." I am a senior analyst at the Civic Threat Analysis Bureau, or CTAB. It is an agency that most people have never heard of, and that is by design. We do not chase serial killers. We do not bust drug cartels. We look at the veins and arteries of the American infrastructure, water treatment plants, power grids, commercial flight patterns, bridge structural integrity, and we analyze the quiet, invisible threats that could bring them all crashing down. My job is to stare at data until I see the pattern of a catastrophe before it happens. I deal in risk. I deal in the kind of information that, if leaked, gives bad actors a blueprint on how to cripple a city for 3 weeks. But I could not tell them that. To explain the danger was to violate the clearance. To violate the clearance was to end my career. So, I had done what I always did. I engaged in my personal policy of non-engagement. I had learned a long time ago that arguing with people who do not respect boundaries is like trying to hold back the tide with a spoon. It is a waste of energy. It is a waste of oxygen. When you argue with a narcissist or a boundary stomper, you are just giving them fuel. You are validating their belief that your no is the start of a negotiation. It is not dramatic, Mom, I had said, keeping my tone flat, boring, uninteresting. It is just compliance. If I lose a page, I get written up. It is bureaucratic nonsense. I lied. It was not bureaucratic nonsense. It was national security. Well, we are just teasing, my father had said. Leaning back in his chair and patting his stomach, he looked around the table, inviting everyone to join in the fun of minimizing my reality. You know how your sister is, always so serious. Luna, honestly, with all this hush-hush stuff, until Homeland Security shows up at the door, I am going to assume you are just filing invoices. He paused for effect, grinning. Or, he added, his eyes twinkling with the punchline, maybe you are a spy, that is it, isn't it? Our Luna, the secret agent. The whole table had erupted. Dylan snorted. Kendra giggled into her wineglass. My mother shook her head with a benevolent, pitying smile, as if my desire for privacy was a cute childhood quirk I had never outgrown, like biting my nails. A spy, Dylan laughed. Yeah, right. She probably just has embarrassing poetry in there. They laughed. They clinked glasses. They felt safe. They felt entitled. They felt that the world was small and manageable, and that nothing inside their house could ever be dangerous unless they allowed it to be. And then, outside, the tires screeched. Now, standing at the window, the laughter from 2 minutes ago felt like a memory from a different lifetime. The juxtaposition was nauseating. The warm, yellow light of the dining room behind me felt fragile, like an eggshell about to be crushed by a steel boot. I watched the tactical team move. They were efficient, terrifyingly efficient. 2 agents peeled off to the left, heading for the back gate to secure the perimeter. 2 more moved to the right. The main stack, 4 heavy figures, moved directly up the front walkway. They did not look like they were coming to ask questions. They looked like they were coming to neutralize a threat. My father's joke about Homeland Security echoed in my mind, mocking me. He had said it as a hyperbole, the most ridiculous thing he could think of. He had no idea that his casual disregard for my basic work files had likely triggered a silent tripwire embedded in the documents, or perhaps a geolocation tag I wasn't even aware was active until the file was compromised. I turned back to the room. My face must have been a mask of absolute horror because Kendra's smile faltered. "Luna?" she asked again, her voice pitching up. "What is wrong? You look like you have seen a ghost." "Get down," I whispered. "What?" Dylan looked up, annoyed. "Get down," I hissed, the command tearing out of my throat with a violence that shocked them into silence. "Everyone, get away from the windows and get on the floor, now." "Luna, don't be ridiculous," my mother started to say, her face twisting into that familiar expression of offense. She thought I was having a tantrum. She thought I was trying to ruin the night because they had teased me. "Glenn, talk to your daughter," my mother snapped. Turning to my father, "She is acting crazy again." My father sighed, pushing his chair back. The legs of the chair scraped against the hardwood floor. A harsh domestic sound that seemed pathetic compared to the approaching storm. "Luna, honey, enough is enough. Sit down and finish your dinner. Nobody is getting on the floor." He stood up, intending to walk over to me, to put a calming hand on my shoulder, to patronize me back into submission. He never made it. The front door did not just open, it exploded inward. It wasn't a breach charge. They hadn't blown the door off its hinges. Thank God. But the force used to open it bypassed any notion of civil courtesy. The deadbolt, which my father always bragged was solid brass, gave way with a sickening crack of splintering wood. The door slammed against the interior wall with such violence that the framed picture of us from a vacation in 2005 rattled and fell, glass shattering on the entryway tiles. The noise was absolute. It sucked the air out of the room. My father froze, halfway between his chair and me, his mouth open in a wordless, "Oh." My mother dropped the stack of plates she was holding. The crash of china was lost in the shout that followed. "Federal agents! Hands! Show me your hands!" The roar filled the foyer, bouncing off the high ceilings. It was a voice designed to bypass logic and trigger pure, lizard-brain submission. The hallway was suddenly flooded with blinding white light from tactical flashlights mounted on rifles. The beams cut through the cozy domestic haze, slicing through dust motes, illuminating the shocked faces of my family like a strobe light in a nightmare. "Police! Get down! Now!" My family did not understand. They stood there, blinking, frozen in their suburban incredulity. They were good people. They paid their taxes. They mowed their lawns. This did not happen to them. This happened to other people on the evening news. "Do it!" I screamed at them, dropping to my knees and interlacing my fingers behind my head. A reflex drilled into me during orientation for worst-case scenarios. "Do what they say!" A laser sight, a bright red dot, danced across my father's chest. He looked down at it, confused, as if a bug had landed on his shirt. "Glenn!" my mother shrieked, finally realizing that the men with guns were real. The lead agent stepped into the living room. He was a mountain of a man, covered in gear, his face obscured by a helmet and ballistic goggles. He swept the room with the barrel of his weapon, his movements sharp, mechanical, and utterly devoid of empathy. "Clear left!" someone shouted from the kitchen. "Clear right! Secure the hallway!" The lead agent's gaze landed on me. He didn't look at my father, who was trembling. He didn't look at my mother, who was sobbing. He looked at me. He saw my posture. He saw that I was the only one who knew the drill. "Identify!" he barked at me. "Luna Cruz," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to be heard. "Senior Analyst, CTAB, ID number 49, Alpha 72, I am the point of contact." "Secure the target," he yelled to his team. Pointing at me, two men rushed forward. The space between the door and the dining table vanished in a blur of motion. My father tried to step forward, a belated, foolish instinct to protect his child kicking in. "Hey, you can't. Back up!" An agent shoved my father hard in the chest. Glenn stumbled back, tripping over his chair and falling heavily onto the floor. "Dad!" Dylan yelled, jumping up. "Down! Everybody down!" The chaos was total. My mother was screaming. Dylan was being forced to the ground by an agent who twisted his arm behind his back with practiced ease. Kendra was curled up under the table, hands over her ears. I remained on my knees, staring at the floorboards, listening to the heavy boots thudding around me. I felt the cold zip tie tighten around my left wrist, then my right. As my face was pressed against the rug, I looked sideways. I could see the bottom of the sideboard. I could see the navy blue folder. The label Basic Work Files was facing me. It looked so innocent. Just paper, just words. But as the agents swarmed my childhood home, turning the sanctuary of my parents' anniversary dinner into a crime scene, I knew the truth. My family thought they had just opened a folder. They thought they had just peeked at a few pages of boring work stuff. They were wrong. They had opened Pandora's box, and now the monsters were inside the house. And the worst part was, as the cold plastic dug into my wrists, I realized that for the first time in my life, I couldn't fix this for them. The timeline for polite warnings had expired exactly 2 minutes ago. To understand why I stood paralyzed in my childhood living room while armed agents breached the front door. You have to rewind the clock. You have to go back 36 hours to a sunny, deceptively peaceful Friday afternoon when the biggest threat I faced was not federal prison. But my mother's passive-aggressive comments about my hair, the drive to Cedar Hollow, Maryland, had been a slow crawl through traffic. I had spent the last 2 hours gripping the steering wheel, mentally rehearsing my lines. I was not going home to relax. I was going home to perform. It was my parents' anniversary weekend, a mandatory summons that I could not decline without triggering a guilt trip that would last until Christmas. As I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed over me. It was a pristine, 2-story colonial that looked like it had been 3D printed from a catalog titled The American Dream. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. The flower beds were geometrically perfect. It was the kind of house that screamed stability. The kind of house where nothing bad was ever supposed to happen. My father, Glenn, was already in the front yard. He was inspecting his hedges with the intensity of a surgeon, a pair of shears in one hand. When he saw my car, he didn't wave. He checked his watch. I was 10 minutes late. "You made it," he said as I stepped out, offering me a cheek to kiss that smelled of aftershave and judgment. "We were worried. Kendra got here an hour ago. She took a half day. But I guess when you work for the government, the schedule is a suggestion, right?" Traffic was bad on the Beltway. "Dad," I said, grabbing my bag. "Happy anniversary." 35 years, he declared, puffing out his chest. 35 years of building this family. It is a milestone. Luna, a real milestone. We just want everyone together. No distractions, no excuses. I followed him inside, and the temperature immediately dropped. Not physically. The thermostat was set to a stifling 72 degrees. But emotionally, the house was filled with the noise of people who loved the sound of their own voices. In the kitchen, my mother, Marianne, was directing operations like a general. She was chopping vegetables with a rhythm that suggested she was angry at the carrots. "Luna, finally," she said, wiping her hands on an apron that said, "Queen of the Kitchen." "Kendra is already helping Dylan set up the patio. Go put your things away and come down. And please, change into something brighter. You look like you're going to a funeral." "It is navy blue. Mom, it is professional," I replied, suppressing the urge to sigh. "It is depressing," she countered. "You are home now. Be a daughter, not an analyst." I went upstairs to my old room. It had been preserved as a shrine to a version of me that no longer existed. High school trophies, faded posters of bands I hadn't listened to in 15 years, and a bedspread that was too pink. I dropped my bag on the floor. Inside that bag was my laptop, secured with biometric encryption, and the portable work kit I never traveled without. I felt a twinge of anxiety leaving it there, even for a moment. I took a deep breath, fixed my happy daughter mask in the mirror, and went back downstairs to join the game. The game was called Who is More Successful, and it was played every time the Cruz family gathered. The rules were simple. Talk about your achievements until everyone else feels small. We gathered on the back patio. The weather was perfect. A cruel irony given the storm that was brewing inside my head. My sister, Kendra, was holding a glass of white wine, looking radiant. She was the head nurse at a major metropolitan hospital. Her job was visceral, heroic, and easy to explain. She saved lives. She touched blood. She comforted the dying. "It was chaos last night," Kendra was saying, her voice projected just loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "We had a multi-car pileup come in, 3 traumas at once. I had to coordinate the entire ER while the attending was stuck in surgery. I did not sit down for 8 hours, but when that little girl's vitals stabilized, God, it was worth it. It is why I do what I do." "That is my girl," my father beamed, flipping a burger on the expensive grill he only used 3 times a year. "Real work, real impact. You are a saint. Kendra, honestly, I do not know where you get the stamina. Then it was Dylan's turn. My younger brother was leaning against the railing, checking his smartwatch. Dylan was a brand consultant, a title that I was fairly certain meant he charged companies $5,000 to tell them to change their logo from blue to teal. Stamina is one thing, Dylan said, flashing a smile that he had paid an orthodontist a fortune to perfect. But leverage is another. I just closed the deal with that tech startup in Austin, the one I told you about. They are giving me 2% equity just to consult on their Q3 launch. 2%. Do you know what that valuation is going to be in 6 months? Let's just say I am looking at the new Tesla models. Incredible, my mother sighed, looking at him with adoration. You have such a head for business, Dylan, just like your father. Then, the inevitable happened. The spotlight turned to me. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the expectation of disappointment. So, Luna, Dylan said, swirling the ice in his drink. How is the Bureau? Still saving the world one spreadsheet at a time? It is fine, I said, taking a sip of my iced tea. Busy. Busy doing what? Kendra asked. She didn't mean it maliciously, or maybe she did. It was hard to tell with Kendra. I mean, we know you analyze threats or whatever, but what does that actually look like? Do you just read the news all day? It is data analysis, I said, reciting the rehearsed line I had used 1,000 times. We monitor infrastructure metrics for irregularities. It is mostly technical. Reports, compliance. Boring, Dylan coughed, disguising the word as a laugh. It is not boring, I said, feeling a spike of irritation. It is necessary. If I do not do my job, things stop working. Important things. Like what? My father asked, looking up from the grill. The traffic lights? The post office? I cannot discuss specifics, Dad. You know that. My father laughed, a booming sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, right. The big secret, you know. The neighbors asked me the other day what you do. I told them you work for the government. They asked which department. I said, I think she counts paper clips for the IRS. It is embarrassing. Luna, you are 32 years old. You have a PhD, and you act like you are in the CIA. It is not the CIA, I said, my voice tightening, and it is not about being cool. It is about security clearances. It is federal law. It feels like you just do not want to share with us, my mother interjected. Walking over with a tray of condiments, she set it down with a sharp clatter. You have always been like this, even as a kid, hiding your diary, locking your door. We are your family, Luna. There is no clearance level higher than family. That is not how it works, Mom, I said. It should be, she snapped. I have a right to know what my daughter does with her life. I have a right to know if you are safe, or if you are wasting your potential in some windowless basement pushing papers. I am not wasting my potential, I said, the defensive tone creeping in despite my best efforts. I handle risk assessments for domestic threats. If I mess up, people get hurt. Is that enough? Dylan rolled his eyes. You say that, but you never have any stories. Kendra has stories. I have stories. You have... I cannot talk about it. It makes us think you are either lying or you are just embarrassed because your job is actually dull. Maybe she is a spy, my father joked again, recycling the line he loved so much. Our little Mata Hari. I looked around the circle. My father, the king of his suburban castle. My mother, the gatekeeper of emotional intimacy. Kendra, the martyr. Dylan, the capitalist. They looked at me and saw a gray, featureless blob. They saw a woman who went to work in a gray building and produced nothing of value. They did not know that 3 weeks ago, my team had flagged an anomaly in the water pressure systems of 3 major cities that turned out to be a coordinated malware test. They did not know that I had spent the last 48 hours tracking a chatter spike that suggested a physical attack on a regional power hub was imminent. They did not know that the paper I pushed was the only thing standing between them and a blackout that could last for months. but I could not tell them. To tell them was to break the law. To tell them was to endanger them. "I am going to get more ice," I said, standing up abruptly. "Run away," Dylan called after me. "That is what you are best at." I walked into the kitchen, my hands shaking. I needed to breathe. I needed to get away from their suffocating normalcy. I walked through the hallway and up the stairs to my room. I closed the door and leaned against it. The air in the room was stale. I looked at my bag on the floor. It hadn't been moved, but the angle looked slightly off. Paranoia? Probably, but in my line of work, paranoia was just another word for awareness. I reached into the side pocket of my laptop bag and pulled out a device I had bought online. It was a portable door lock, a piece of red metal and chrome that could jam a door shut from the inside. Even if someone had a key, it was not standard issue. It was my own personal insurance policy. I installed it into the strike plate of the bedroom door. It took 5 seconds. It was a small, physical act of rebellion. "You cannot come in here." The lock said, "This is my space, my rules." I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the lock. I felt ridiculous. I was a grown woman barricading herself in her childhood bedroom. Because her family didn't understand the concept of need to know, I told myself I just needed to survive the weekend. 24 hours, eat the barbecue, smile at the jokes, ignore Dylan's bragging. Then I could drive back to my apartment, back to my quiet, controlled life, where the only threats were terrorists and hackers, not my mother's disappointment. I was just starting to calm down when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was not a text. It was a secure line notification. I pulled the phone out. The screen was black, save for a single icon pulsing in the center. It was the emergency channel for my unit at the bureau. My stomach dropped. This line was never used for routine check-ins. It was used for crises. It was used when the algorithms turned red. I accepted the connection and held the phone to my ear. "Cruz," I said. "We have a flag on the Mid-Atlantic grid analysis," a voice said. It was Director Holloway. He did not say hello. He did not ask how my weekend was. His voice was as cold and sharp as a scalpel. "The anomaly you documented last week? It just synchronized with a second node. We need a full reevaluation of the vulnerability index. Immediately." "I am in Maryland, sir," I said, instinctively standing up. "I am remote." "I know where you are," Holloway said. "I need you to pull the raw files. Verify the encryption keys on the bridge protocols. If that sync is real, we have a window of less than 12 hours before the system becomes accessible to the hostiles. Do you have your kit?" "Yes," I said. "I have my kit." "Get to work," he said. "I need a preliminary report in 2 hours. Do not rely on the cloud for the raw data. Use the hard copies if you have to cross-reference the older schematics. We cannot risk a network footprint if they are already inside." The line clicked dead. I stood there in the silence of my pink bedroom. Downstairs, I could hear my father laughing at something Dylan had said. I could hear the clink of silverware. They were starting dinner without me. 2 hours. I had 2 hours to analyze a potential catastrophe that could cripple the entire eastern seaboard. And I had to do it in a house where privacy was considered an insult. I looked at my bag. Inside was the navy blue folder, the one I had labeled basic work files to keep them from asking questions. I unlocked the door, removed the red metal jammer, and took a deep breath. I was about to walk into the lion's den with a stake in my hand, and I prayed, I desperately prayed, that they were too busy admiring themselves to notice what I was carrying. The moment Director Holloway terminated the connection, my bedroom ceased to be a place of rest and transformed into a temporary sensitive compartmented information facility, or SCIF. Of course, a real SCIF has lead-lined walls, white noise generators to scramble laser microphones, and no windows. I had pink floral wallpaper, a vanity table cluttered with old perfume bottles, and a view of the neighbor's meticulously weeded garden. It was a security nightmare, and my pulse was already thudding a steady, anxious rhythm against my ribs. I moved the perfume bottles to the floor. I needed a clean surface. I sat down and opened my mobile work kit. This was not a standard laptop bag. It was a reinforced, signal-blocking Faraday case that weighed about 8 pounds empty. Inside was my agency-issued laptop, a matte black slab of polycarbonate with no manufacturer logo, no USB ports, and a screen that polarized to black if viewed from any angle other than directly straight on. I initiated the boot sequence. It did not ask for a password. Instead, I had to stare into the camera for an iris scan and place my thumb on a specific sensor pad. The machine hummed, a low, barely audible frequency that sounded like a trapped insect. Access granted. Level 4, clearance verified. I was in. The package Holloway had flagged was waiting in the secure Dropbox. It was a massive data dump regarding the structural integrity and traffic flow controls of the I-95 corridor. The anomaly, the glitch that had synchronized across two independent nodes, suggested that someone was probing the bridge dampeners. If those dampeners were manipulated remotely during high winds or heavy traffic, the harmonic resonance could tear the concrete apart. It would not look like a bomb. It would look like a tragedy of engineering failure. I began the download, while the progress bar crawled across the screen. I reached into the secondary compartment of my case and pulled out the physical element of my toolkit. This was the fatal error. This was the object that would ruin us. It was a stack of about 50 pages of high-density schematics and grid layouts. In a perfect world, everything would be digital. But the legacy blueprints for the older sections of the grid were scanned from microfiche in the 1980s. On a 13-inch screen, they were unreadable pixelated messes. To cross-reference the digital attack vectors against the physical wiring of the bridges, I needed to see the full layout. I needed paper. I held the folder in my hands. It was a standard navy blue heavy stock folder. On the front, in the upper right corner, was a white adhesive label. Basic work files. I had typed that label 6 months ago. It was a calculated piece of social engineering. In my line of work, we are taught that the best camouflage is boredom. If I had labeled it Classified Infrastructure Assessment or Do Not Touch, it would have been a beacon. It would have screamed. There is a secret here, and human beings, especially my family, cannot resist a secret. But basic work files? That implies timesheets. It implies HR compliance forms. It implies the dull, gray administrative sludge that everyone hates. It was designed to make eyes glaze over and look away. I had banked on the assumption that my family found my job too boring to investigate. I spread the papers out on the vanity, weighting the corners down with a stapler and a heavy glass candle holder. For the next hour, I ceased to be Luna Cruz, the disappointing daughter. I was an analyst. I cross-referenced the code injection timestamps with the bridge's maintenance logs. I highlighted discrepancies in yellow ink. I built a mental model of the attack surface. The work was consuming. It demanded absolute focus. The world outside the room faded away until there was only the logic of the grid and the hunt for the anomaly. Then, 3 sharp raps on the door shattered the concentration. "Luna!" My mother's voice was muffled by the wood, but the tone of irritation cut through clearly. "Dinner has been on the table for 10 minutes. The roast is going to be dry." I jolted, my hand slipping and making a stray mark on the paper. I checked the time on my laptop. I had been working for 65 minutes. "I will be right down." "Mom," I called out, my voice tight. "I just need to finish this section." "We are waiting for you," she replied, not moving away from the door. I could hear her fingernails tapping against the frame. "It is rude to make the family wait, especially on our anniversary." "I know," I said, typing a quick command to suspend the encryption key. 5 minutes. "Please." I heard a heavy sigh, the kind that was meant to be heard through walls. 5 minutes. Then I am sending Dylan up to drag you down." I heard her footsteps recede. I looked at the mess on the desk. I could not leave it like this. The laptop had an automatic lockout, but the papers, the basic work files, were vulnerable. I gathered them up quickly, tapping the edges on the desk to align them. I slid them back into the navy blue folder. I looked at the hard case, The correct protocol was to put the folder back inside the case, lock the case, and tether the case to a heavy piece of furniture, but I was rushing. I was stressed. My mother's voice was still echoing in my ears, triggering that childish fear of being scolded. I put the folder inside the hard case, but I did not engage the secondary tumblers. I simply snapped the latches shut. It looked closed. It was mechanically closed, but it was not secured. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked to the door. I paused. I turned the lock on the doorknob. Then, for good measure, I took the key to the room, an old skeleton key that my parents kept in the lock, and put it in my pocket. It felt paranoid. It felt excessive. Who locks their bedroom door in their parents' house? I do. I thought, because I know them. I walked down the stairs, trying to shift my brain from counterterrorism to pleasant dinner conversation. It was a jarring gear shift, like slamming a car from fifth gear into reverse. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard them in the dining room. The acoustics of the house carried their voices perfectly. "She is probably reorganizing her inbox," Dylan was saying. His mouth sounded full. "I saw the label on her folder earlier, basic work files. Who brings paperwork home on a weekend? It is pathetic." "Now, Dylan," my father's voice chimed in, soothing but dismissive. "She takes it seriously. You know how the government is. Lots of red tape. She probably has to document every bathroom break." "I just don't get the secrecy," Dylan continued. "She acts like she is guarding the crown jewels. It is just basic files. I bet I could read the whole thing in 10 minutes and not find a single interesting sentence." "We're family. What's the harm?" my father said, using a phrase he often butchered but loved to say, meaning, "We are family." A little peek wouldn't hurt anyone. We would probably fall asleep reading it. They laughed. I stood in the hallway, my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. They were talking about my work, my life, as if it were a joke. As if the things I protected did not keep the lights on in their house and the water running in their taps. I took a deep breath, composed my face into a neutral expression, and walked into the dining room. "Sorry I'm late," I said, pulling out my chair. The conversation stopped abruptly, but the smiles remained. Smug, knowing smiles. "There she is," my father boomed, carving a slice of roast beef that looked significantly overcooked. The worker bee emerges from the hive. "Pass the potatoes, please," I said, ignoring the comment. "So," Dylan said, reaching across the table for the wine bottle, "did you finish your filing, or did you run out of highlighters?" "It is handled," I said quietly. "You know," my mother said, spooning carrots onto my plate without asking. "Kendra's friend, Miles, works in security, private security. He makes 3 times what you make, Luna, and he never brings work home. He says real professionals know how to delegate." The name Miles meant nothing to me then. It was just another stick my mother was using to beat me with. "Government work is different, Mom," I said, stabbing a carrot. "We do not have the same resources." "Clearly," Dylan muttered. "I am just saying," my mother continued. "It seems like you make your life harder than it needs to be. All this restricted nonsense. If you just worked a normal job, you could relax. You could enjoy the weekend. Look at your sister. She saves lives, and she is sitting here enjoying a glass of wine." Kendra smiled sympathetically. But she didn't defend me. In this house, defending the scapegoat was a dangerous political move. "It is okay, Mom. Luna likes her structure." "I do not like structure," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I like safety. There is a difference." "Safety," my father chuckled. "Honey, we live in Cedar Hollow. The most dangerous thing here is the homeowners association when your grass is too high. You need to learn to leave the paranoia at the office." I chewed my meat. It was dry, tough, and tasted like ash. Every instinct in my body wanted to scream. I wanted to slam my hand on the table and tell them exactly what I had just seen on my screen. I wanted to tell them that safety is an illusion that people like me maintain with sleepless nights and ulcers. I wanted to tell them that the only reason they could sleep soundly in their suburban fortress was because I was awake. But I swallowed the meat. I swallowed the anger. I swallowed the truth. You are right, Dad. I lied. I should relax more. That is the spirit, he said, raising his glass. To family, and to leaving work where it belongs. We clinked glasses. The crystal rang out with a clear, cheerful sound that felt like a mockery. The dinner dragged on for another hour. I played my part. I asked Dylan about his branding contract. I listened to Kendra talk about the hospital's new parking policy. I nodded when my mother critiqued my outfit again. I was a model of compliance. When we finally cleared the table, I pleaded a headache. It wasn't entirely a lie. The tension in my jaw was radiating up into my temples. Going back to the cave? Dylan teased, as I headed for the stairs. Just going to sleep, I said. It has been a long week. I walked up the stairs, feeling their eyes on my back. I could feel their judgment, heavy and tangible. I reached my room and unlocked the door. The air inside was cool and still. I checked the vanity. The hard case was exactly where I had left it. The latches were closed. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Safe. I opened the case to check for any updates. The screen woke up instantly. There was a flashing red icon in the corner of the secure mail client. New message? Priority? Alpha. I clicked it open. It was from Holloway. Update on I-95 package. New intelligence suggests the anomaly is masking a physical breach point. Attached is Addendum B. Requires immediate visual confirmation against the 1982 structural blueprints. Do not proceed with the main analysis until this is verified. Time sensitive. I looked at the clock. It was 9:30 at night. My eyes were burning. My brain felt like it was packed with cotton wool. I looked at the attachment. It was dense. To do this right, I would need to pull the papers out again. I would need to spread them on the floor. I would need another 2 hours. Minimum. I could hear the television downstairs. My family was watching a movie. They were laughing. I was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally drained from the dinner. The thought of diving back into the complexities of the grid, of straining my eyes against the faint light of the lamp, felt impossible. I will do it in the morning. I told myself, I will wake up at 0500. Everyone will be asleep. The house will be quiet. I will have a clear head. It was a rational decision. Fatigue leads to mistakes in analysis. It was better to be fresh. I closed the laptop. I did not put the folder back in the main vault of the case. I left it in the secondary pocket, the one that was easier to access. After all, I was just going to sleep for a few hours. The door was locked. The key was in my pocket. I was in the house where I grew up. I stripped off my clothes and put on my pajamas. I brushed my teeth. I crawled into the bed that still felt like my childhood, smelling of lavender detergent. I closed my eyes, telling myself that the files were safe, that the label Basic Work Files was a sufficient shield, and that my family, for all their flaws, would never violate the sanctity of a locked door. I was wrong. I was so incredibly, catastrophically wrong. As I drifted off to sleep, I didn't hear the soft click of the spare key sliding into the lock. I didn't hear the door handle turn. I slept the sleep of the innocent, unaware that the nightmare was already standing in the doorway. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning with a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with the mattress and everything to do with the geography. The air in the house felt recycled, heavy with the phantom weight of last night's arguments. I needed to get out. I needed oxygen that hadn't been filtered through my mother's expectations. I dressed quietly, pulling on leggings and a hoodie. I checked the hard case on the vanity one last time. It was latched. The room felt secure. I took the skeleton key from the nightstand, walked out, and locked the bedroom door behind me. I listened for the click of the tumbler. It was a solid, mechanical sound, a promise. I slipped the key into the zippered pocket of my hoodie, patted it once to be sure, and crept down the stairs. The house was silent. My father's snoring drifted down from the master suite like a rhythmic warning. I slipped out the back door and started walking. I walked for 40 minutes. I did a loop around the neighborhood, passing the perfectly manicured lawns and the silent driveways where expensive cars sat like sleeping beasts. I breathed in the cool Maryland air, trying to recalibrate my mind. I told myself that the anxiety was irrational. I told myself that in 3 hours, I would pack my car and leave. I would go back to my apartment, back to the SCIF, back to a world where restricted access meant something. I let my guard down. Just a fraction. I allowed myself to believe that the lock on my door was a boundary my family would finally respect, simply because I had made it physical. I was naive. When I returned to the house, the smell of coffee was wafting from the kitchen. It should have been a welcoming scent. Instead, it made my stomach turn. I walked through the kitchen, mumbling a quick good morning to the empty room, and headed straight for the stairs. I wanted to pack. I wanted to grab the case, verify the addendum Halloway had sent, and get out before noon. I reached the top of the landing and turned toward my room. I stopped. The door was not the way I had left it. I had locked it. I knew I had locked it. I had felt the key turn. I had heard the click. But now, the door was standing ajar by 2 inches. A sliver of darkness from the hallway cut into the room. The cold that washed over me started at the base of my skull and flooded downward, numbing my fingers. It wasn't the cold of temperature. It was the physiological drop in blood pressure that comes with shock. I pushed the door open with a trembling hand. My eyes went instantly to the vanity. The hard case was there, but the latches were undone. The lid was thrown back, gaping open like a screaming mouth. The secondary pocket was empty. The navy blue folder, the one labeled Basic Work Files, it was gone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry out. My training kicked in, but not the kind that makes you fight. It was the kind that makes you assess damage. I scanned the room. Nothing else was touched. My laptop was still docked, its biometric light pulsing a slow, steady blue. They hadn't touched the machine. They didn't care about the machine. They wanted the paper. They wanted the secret I had tried to hide in plain sight. I turned around and walked back to the stairs. My movements felt robotic, disjointed. I was a passenger in my own body. Every step down the carpeted staircase felt like a step toward a guillotine. I heard them before I saw them. "This is just a lot of lines," Dylan's voice floated up from the living room. "I don't even know what I'm looking at. It looks like a subway map drawn by a drunk person." "It is not a subway map," Kendra said. Her voice was quieter, puzzled. "Look at the header. It references a load-bearing capacity. This looks like structural engineering." "See?" My mother's voice chimed in, triumphant and warm. "I told you it was just work stuff. She made such a fuss over nothing." I rounded the corner into the living room. The scene that greeted me was a domestic tableau of absolute catastrophe. They were sitting around the low coffee table. The morning sun was streaming in through the bay window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. On the table, amidst coffee mugs and a plate of half-eaten pastries, lay the contents of the Basic Work Files. My family had spread them out. They had taken the 50 pages of classified infrastructure vulnerabilities and arranged them like a Sunday morning jigsaw puzzle. My mother was sitting on the sofa, holding a page that detailed the chemical composition of the coolant used in the primary transformers. She was smiling, a soft, indulgent smile that said she had won. She had cracked the shell of her difficult daughter. Kendra was leaning forward, frowning at a diagram of a bridge support pylon. Dylan was standing by the window. He was holding his phone up. He wasn't just looking at it, he was aiming the camera lens at the documents spread on the table. The air in the room seemed to vanish. "Put it down," I said. My voice did not sound like my own. It was low, guttural, and vibrating with a frequency of danger that I had never used in this house before. They looked up. "Oh, Luna," my mother said, not sensing the shift in the atmosphere. She waved the page at me playfully. "Good morning. Sleepyhead, we just wanted to see what was so important that you had to lock us out. You know we have a spare key for every room, right? It is for emergencies. And frankly, your attitude last night felt like an emergency." "Put it down," I repeated. I stepped into the room. Don't touch anything else. Don't move. Dylan laughed. He lowered his phone but didn't put it away. God, you are intense. Relax, sis. It is literally just blueprints. What is this? A bridge? A tunnel? It is boring. I told you it was boring. You breached a locked door, I said, my eyes locking on his phone. What did you do with that phone? Dylan? Nothing, he scoffed, defensive now. I was just checking a text. He was taking a picture of the coffee spill, Kendra said, pointing to a dark ring on one of the pages. Mom spilled a little espresso on this one. Sorry, coffee. On the master schematic for the Eastern Seaboard's power grid. I felt a wave of nausea so violent I thought I might vomit right there on the Persian rug. I asked you to respect one thing, I said, my voice trembling now, not with fear, but with a rage so hot it felt cold. One thing. We are your family, my mother snapped, losing her patience. She dropped the page onto the table. Stop acting like we are enemies. We have a right to know who you are. We have a right to see what you do. Look at this. It is just numbers and lines. Why did you have to treat us like criminals over this? Yeah, Dylan added, picking up a cover sheet. He squinted at the text in the bottom left corner. It is not even that special. It just says restricted distribution down here. It doesn't say top secret or aliens inside. You are making a mountain out of a molehill. Restricted. The word hung in the air. To Dylan, it was a corporate buzzword. To me, it was a legal classification. But as I looked closer at the page he was holding, and the page Kendra was reading, I saw something that stopped my heart. The document Kendra was holding was not from the main stack. It was the addendum, the one I had downloaded last night, the one I hadn't had time to fully review. And in the corner of that page, printed in bold red ink that looked black in the bright sunlight, was a code. No foreign. Critical infrastructure. Tier 1. Tier 1. That wasn't basic work files. That was, if this gets out, people die. Kendra, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Give me that page. Slowly. Kendra looked at me. For the first time, she saw something in my face that scared her. The nurse in her recognized the signs of genuine trauma response. She saw the dilated pupils, the pallor, the shallow breathing. Luna? She asked, her voice wavering. Is this actually bad? Give it to me, I ordered. I walked to the table. I didn't grab the papers. I didn't sweep them up. That would disturb the order. I needed to know what they had seen. I needed to know the extent of the damage. I looked at the chaotic spread on the table. My brain, trained to spot patterns in data, switched into overdrive. I knew exactly what was in that folder. I knew the page count. I knew the sequence. There were 50 pages in the main file, 3 pages in the addendum, total of 53. I began to count. My eyes darted across the table. 1, 2, 3, 10, 20. What are you doing? My father asked, coming in from the kitchen with a mug in his hand. Is everything okay? Why is everyone so quiet? Hush, Glenn, my mother hissed. 30, 35, 40. I moved around the table, my hands hovering over the paper but not touching it. 48, 49, 50, 51, 52. I stopped. I counted again. Faster this time. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. 1, 2, 3, 52. There were 52 pages on the table. There should be 53. I looked at the floor. Nothing. I looked at the folder itself, lying discarded on the armchair. Empty. I looked at the hard case upstairs in my mind's eye. I knew it was empty. One page was missing, and it wasn't just any page. Based on the sequence on the table, the missing page was page 42 of the main file, the page that listed the physical coordinates of the override junctions, the page that was essentially the key to the lock. I looked up at my family. They were staring at me, a mixture of annoyance and confusion on their faces. They still didn't get it. They thought I was counting to see if they had crumpled one. They thought I was worried about a coffee stain. They had no idea that the air in the room had just become radioactive. "Where is it?" I asked. "Where is what?" my mother asked, exasperated. "We didn't lose anything, Luna. We just looked at them. God, you are obsessive." "There are 53 pages," I said. My voice was flat, dead. "There are 52 here. Maybe you miscounted," Dylan said, shrugging. "Or maybe you left one in the printer. Who cares? It is just a missing page." "I did not miscount," I said. "I never miscount." I looked at Dylan. I looked at the phone in his hand. "Did you take it?" I asked him. "No," he said, offended. "Why would I steal a piece of paper? I told you, I might have taken a picture of the pile to send to the group chat, just to show them how boring your secret life is, but I didn't take a page." "The group chat," I repeated. The words tasted like blood. "You sent a picture to a group chat?" "It didn't go through yet," he said quickly, sensing he had crossed a line. "The signal here sucks. It is still loading." "Stop the upload," I commanded. "Now, put the phone in airplane mode." "Make me," he sneered, engaging in a power struggle that he didn't realize was over his own survival. I ignored him. I turned to Kendra. "Did you take a page?" "No," she said, shaking her head. I saw Miles last night. He stopped by for a second, but I didn't have the papers then. They were in your room." "Miles?" I asked. "Who is Miles?" "My friend," she said. "The one Mom talked about. He just came to the door to pick up a sweater I borrowed. He didn't come inside. Well, not really. Just into the foyer. The foyer, the stairs. The room." The timeline in my head snapped into focus. I had gone to sleep at 10. The door was locked. But the key, the spare key. My mother said they had a spare key for every room. "When did Miles come over?" I asked. "Around 10:30, Kendra said. "Why?" "And where was the spare key?" I asked. Turning to my mother looked uncomfortable. "It hangs on the hook in the mudroom. Why does it matter?" "Was anyone in the mudroom?" "I don't know," my mother said defensively. "People were coming and going. The back door was unlocked. It was a party. Luna, why are you interrogating us?" I looked back at the table. Page 42, the coordinates. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a clerical error. Someone had entered the house. Someone had used the key. Someone had opened the case. And someone had removed the single most valuable piece of intelligence in the entire file, leaving the rest to look like a family snooping session. My knees felt weak. I grabbed the back of the armchair to steady myself. "Luna," my father asked, his voice losing its bluster. "You are scaring your mother. What is going on?" I looked at them. My father, with his barbecue apron still hanging on the chair. My mother, with her wounded pride. My sister, with her secret boyfriend. My brother, with his phone full of evidence. "You didn't just look at my files," I whispered. I looked at the empty space on the table where page 42 should have been. "Who took the other page?" I asked, and the question hung in the air, heavy and terrible, a bell tolling for the end of our lives as we knew them. "Step away from the table," I said. The command came out of me not as a request, but as a reflex. It was the voice I used during live fire exercises, the voice I used when directing junior analysts during a crisis simulation. It was a voice stripped of all emotion, devoid of daughterly affection, and calibrated for absolute compliance. "Step away from the table. Put your phones on the floor. Do not touch the papers again." The silence that followed was brittle. It was the sound of a family dynamic shattering. My father, Glenn, was the first to react. The shock on his face curdled instantly into indignation. He was a man who had spent 35 years being the king of his own castle, the benevolent dictator of the Cruz household. He was not used to receiving orders in his own living room, certainly not from the daughter he still viewed as a quiet, overly anxious bureaucrat. "Now you listen to me, young lady," he sputtered, his face flushing a dangerous shade of crimson. He took a step toward me, his finger raised in a scolding gesture that I hadn't seen since I was 16. You do not come into my house, eat my food, and then start barking orders at your mother and me like we are children. Who do you think you are? I am not asking you, Dad, I said, my eyes never leaving the table where the scattered documents lay like radioactive waste. I am telling you, for your own safety, step back. My safety? He laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. From what? From a piece of paper? You have lost your mind. Luna, this job has made you paranoid. You think because you work for the government you can treat your family like criminals? I am treating you like a containment breach, I said, the words slipping out before I could soften them. My mother gasped. A breach? Is that what we are to you? A problem to be fixed? Yes, I said. Right now, yes. I moved between them and the table, using my body as a physical shield. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm, but my hands were steady. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my agency phone. It was a ruggedized device, thick and heavy, with a dedicated side button that I had prayed I would never have to press in a domestic setting. Dylan, I said, turning my attention to my brother. He was still holding his phone, looking defiant but slightly uncertain, like a kid caught playing with matches who hasn't realized the curtains are already on fire. Put the phone on the floor, screen down. You are being psycho, Dylan sneered. He took a step back, clutching his phone tighter. I told you. I didn't send it anywhere yet. I just took a picture so I could read it later. I wanted to see what the big deal was. I wanted to prove to you that your basic work files are just boring gibberish. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. You took a picture to read later, I repeated, my voice dropping to a whisper. Yeah, Dylan said, emboldened by my quietness. So what? It is on my camera roll. I will delete it if it makes you stop freaking out. God, you are such a drama queen. He didn't understand. None of them understood. Dylan, I said, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Do you have automatic cloud backup enabled on your gallery? Dylan blinked. I don't know. Yeah, everyone does. It backs up to the cloud when I'm on Wi-Fi. Why? I looked over his shoulder. In the corner of the living room, on the bookshelf next to the family photos, sat the wireless router. It was a standard, consumer-grade black box with a row of blue LED lights. The light labeled Upload was blinking. It wasn't just flickering, it was flashing rapidly. A frantic strobe of data transfer. Oh my God, I breathed. The picture wasn't just on his phone, it was being packetized, encrypted, or worse, unencrypted, and beamed out of this house. It was traveling through the local ISP, bouncing off a server in Northern Virginia, and landing in a data center that I did not control. And if Dylan had any third-party apps with gallery permissions, social media, shady photo editors, games, that image was effectively public domain. You didn't just take a picture, I said, my voice trembling with the magnitude of the disaster. You just broadcast a Tier 1 structural vulnerability to the open internet. I did not, Dylan shouted, his voice cracking. I am just standing here. I didn't argue. There was no time to argue. Arguments were for people who had options. I had no options left. I pressed the side button on my phone 3 times. Short, long. The screen lit up red. A biometric prompt appeared. I scanned my thumb. Incident report initiated. I lifted the phone to my ear. It didn't ring. It connected instantly to the watch officer at CTAB headquarters. This is Analyst Cruz, I said. My voice changed. It became the voice on the tapes, the voice of the professional. Code black. I repeat, code black. Immediate containment required. My family froze. The change in my demeanor was so absolute, so terrifyingly official, that it cut through their indignation like a knife through fabric. My father's mouth hung open. My mother stopped crying. Location, the voice in my ear demanded. It was a synthesized voice. followed immediately by a human operator. Confirm location. Residential address, I recited, rattling off the coordinates of my childhood home. 324 Maple Drive, Cedar Hollow, Maryland, Grid Sector 7 Alpha. Nature of breach, the operator asked. Physical compromise of hard copy intelligence, I said, staring at the router. Unauthorized access by civilians. Digital proliferation confirmed. 1 page missing from the master file. Page 42. Addendum Bravo. Civilians present? 4, I said. Immediate family. Hostile ignorant. Hostile ignorant was the classification for people who caused damage not out of malice, but out of stupidity. It was the most dangerous category because it was unpredictable. Wait, Kendra said. I ignored her. I am initiating local lockdown. I need a scrub team for the digital footprint, and I need a recovery team for the physical asset. Luna, stop it, my mother screamed. Who are you talking to? Hang up the phone. You are scaring me. Asset secure? The operator asked. Negative, I said. Asset is compromised. 1 page is unaccounted for. Suspected theft by third party utilizing social engineering access via family member. Luna! Kendra stepped forward. Her face was pale, the color of old paper. Her hands were shaking. I lowered the phone slightly, but I did not disconnect. Stand back. Kendra. The missing page, Kendra whispered. Her voice was barely audible. The one you are looking for. What about it? I asked. Does it? She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the table and then back to me. Does it have a list? A list of destination coordinates? Like GPS numbers for bridge supports? The room went dead silent. I felt a cold sensation in the pit of my stomach that was colder than fear. It was the chill of betrayal. How do you know that? I asked. Page 42 was a dense grid of hexadecimal code and latitudinal references. To a layperson, to a nurse, to a brand consultant, it should have looked like nonsense. It should have looked like a math homework assignment from hell. The only way to know it was a list of destinations was if someone had told you what to look for, or if you had studied the legend on page 1 and cross-referenced it. Kendra stammered. I looked at it last night. You said you didn't see the files, I said. You said you only saw them this morning. I glanced at them, she lied. I could see the lie. It was written in the twitch of her eye, the way she pulled her cardigan tighter around herself. When I came in to get the sweater, the case was open. The case was locked, I said. I locked it. It must have been open, she insisted, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. I saw the list. I just thought it was weird. That is all. I didn't take it. Why would you remember that specific detail? I asked, stepping closer to her. Out of 50 pages of text, why did you memorize the coordinates? I didn't memorize them. You knew what they were, I said. You knew they were destinations. Who told you that? Did Miles tell you that? Don't bring him into this, she snapped. Luna, that is enough, my father roared. He lunged forward and grabbed my arm. His grip was strong, fueled by a lifetime of manual labor and current rage. Put the phone away. Stop interrogating your sister. You are acting like a lunatic. I didn't fight him. I didn't pull away. I simply looked at his hand on my arm, and then I looked him in the eye. Dad, I said softly, let go, right now. Or what? He challenged. You will arrest me? No, I said. But the people on the other end of this line will. Secure the line, analyst, the voice in my ear said. Response team is ETA 2 minutes. Do not engage hostiles. Secure the perimeter. Copy, I said. I pulled my arm free. My father let go. Not because I overpowered him, but because he saw the look in my eyes. It was a look of absolute resignation. I wasn't his daughter anymore. I was a mechanism of the state. They are coming, I told them. Who is coming? Dylan asked, his voice trembling. He had finally lowered his phone. But the damage was done. The router was still blinking. The data was gone. "The cleanup crew," I said. "Clean up?" my mother sobbed. "What does that mean? Are they going to hurt us?" "They are going to secure the information," I said. "And they are going to find the missing page." I looked at Kendra. She was backing away toward the kitchen, looking like a trapped animal. "You can't leave the room, Kendra," I said. "I need a glass of water," she said, her voice shaking. "Sit down," I ordered. "You can't tell me what to do," she shouted. "I am the older sister." "Not today," I said. Then we heard it. It started as a low rumble in the distance, a vibration that I could feel through the soles of my shoes. It wasn't the sound of a single car. It was the sound of a convoy, heavy engines, diesel, the sound of power approaching at speed. My father walked to the window. He pulled back the curtain, the same curtain I would be standing behind 2 minutes later. "What the hell?" he whispered. "What is it, Glenn?" my mother asked, wiping her eyes. There are so many of them," my father said. He turned back to me, his face pale, his anger replaced by a dawn of terrifying realization. "Luna, what have you done?" "I didn't do this," I said, looking at the papers scattered on the coffee table, the open Pandora's box of my family's making. "You did? You wanted to know what I do? You wanted to be part of my world?" The sound of tires screeching on gravel tore through the morning air. Doors slammed. Shouts echoed from the front yard. "Now you are," I said. The dog next door started barking. The heavy thud of boots hit the porch. I looked at Dylan, who was staring at his phone in horror. I looked at Kendra, who was trembling against the wall. I looked at my parents, who were holding each other like passengers on a sinking ship. "Don't move," I said, as the front door handle turned. "And for God's sake, don't say anything unless they ask you." The polite fiction of our family weekend was over. The reality of my life had just arrived on the doorstep. And it wasn't bringing a fruit basket. The front door did not open with the polite click of a latch. It swung inward with a force that suggested the person on the other side had no intention of asking for permission. "Federal agents! Police! Get on the ground! Now!" The wall of sound hit us before the men did. It was a shouted chorus, practiced and synchronized, designed to override cognitive function and trigger the primal freeze response. And it worked. My father, Glenn, who had been ready to argue with me a moment ago, crumbled. He didn't drop to his knees. He simply sagged, his legs giving way under the sheer acoustic pressure. He hit the carpet with a heavy thud, his face pale, his mouth moving wordlessly. My mother screamed, a short, sharp sound that was cut off as a laser sight swept across her chest. She curled into a ball on the sofa, covering her head with her hands. Dylan froze, phone still in hand, looking like a deer staring down the barrel of a hunter's rifle. "Drop the phone! Drop it!" An agent in full tactical gear, helmet, ballistic vest, drop-leg holster, closed the distance to Dylan in 2 strides. He didn't wait for compliance. He slapped the phone out of Dylan's hand. It skittered across the hardwood floor, spinning until it hit the baseboard. "Hands behind your head. Interlace your fingers. Do it now." I was already on my knees. I knew the drill. I knew that in the first 30 seconds of a breach, there are no friendlies, only targets and potential threats. I interlaced my fingers behind my head, kept my spine straight, and looked directly at the floor. I did not move. I did not speak. I waited for the control phase to settle. 6 agents filled the living room. They moved like water, flowing around the furniture, checking corners, clearing the kitchen, securing the hallway. The air was thick with the smell of nylon, gun oil, and aggressive competence. "Living room clear. Kitchen clear. Stairs clear." A tall agent with a Homeland Security investigation patch on his chest walked into the center of the room. He wasn't holding a rifle. He was holding the authority of the federal government. He scanned the room. his eyes landing on me. He saw the posture. He saw the lack of panic. "Identify," he barked. "Luna Cruz," I said, my voice steady, loud enough to be heard, but not loud enough to be a challenge. "Senior Analyst, CTAB, ID number 49 Alpha 72. I am the reporting officer. Status is Code Black. The agent, let's call him team leader, signaled to his men. Stand down on the female subject. Secure the others." "This is a mistake," my father yelled from the floor, his face pressed against the rug. "We are American citizens. You cannot just barge in here. My daughter works for you people." "Sir, stay down and keep your mouth shut," an agent standing over him said, his voice flat and bored. The team leader walked over to me. "Stand up." Slowly, I rose to my feet. My legs felt heavy, but I locked my knees to keep from shaking. "Situation report," he said. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask about the family reunion. He wanted the data. "Unauthorized physical access to Tier 1 infrastructure documents," I recited, pointing to the coffee table where the papers lay scattered like confetti. "Civilian interference, 1 page missing from the master file. Page 42, Addendum Bravo." The team leader's eyes narrowed behind his ballistic glasses. He looked at the table. He saw the navy blue folder. He saw the label Basic Work Files lying innocuously next to a plate of half-eaten croissants. "Digital footprint?" he asked. "Affirmative," I said, pointing to the router in the corner. Subject Dylan Cruz took a photograph of the spread. Device is on the floor near the south wall. Router indicated active upload at the time of the breach. Potential cloud synchronization. The team leader turned to the agent nearest the router. "Pull the plug. Bag the router. Bag the phone. Immediate Faraday containment." "Wait!" Dylan shouted as an agent picked up his phone and dropped it into a silver, signal-blocking bag. "That is my phone. You can't take that. I have client data on there. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," the team leader said, not even looking at him. "I suggest you use it." "This is insane," my mother wailed from the sofa. "We are just a family. We were just looking. Luna, tell them we are just looking." I looked at my mother. Her mascara was running. She looked small, terrified, and utterly confused. She still thought this was a social misunderstanding. She thought she could talk her way out of it like she talked her way out of a speeding ticket. "I cannot tell them that, Mom," I said softly, "because it is not true anymore." The team leader walked to the coffee table. He picked up one of the documents. He didn't read the text. He looked for the markings. He saw the red stamp in the corner. He saw the classification code. His demeanor shifted. Before, he was efficient. Now, he was grave. "Tier 1, he muttered. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was a flash of something like pity in his eyes. "You brought this into a residential zone?" "Emergency analysis request," I said defensively. "Director Holloway authorized remote review. I followed protocol, secured case, biometric lock, physical room key. And yet," he said, gesturing to the mess. "Here we are." He picked up his radio. "Control, this is Team 1. We have confirmed compromise of Tier 1 assets. Initiate wide area signal scrub. Alert the cyber division to flag the IP address associated with this residence. We need a kill switch on any outgoing packets." He turned back to the room. "Separate them. Father in the kitchen, mother in the dining room, son in the hallway. I want statements. Isolate them." "No," my mother cried, as an agent took her arm. "I want to stay with my husband, Glenn." "Go with them, Mom," I said. "Please, don't fight." They were led away, protesting, weeping, looking back at me with eyes that accused me of betrayal. I stood alone in the living room with the team leader and Kendra, who was still sitting on the chair, pale as a ghost, clutching her water glass. "You?" the team leader said to Kendra. "Stay put." He turned to me. "You said page 42 is missing. The coordinate list." "Yes," I said. "We have searched the immediate area?" "I did a visual count," I said. 52 pages present, 1 missing. It is not under the table. It is not in the folder. The team leader looked around the room. He looked at the bookshelf. He looked at the fireplace. Then he looked at me with a gaze that stripped away every defense I had. "Analyst Cruz," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "I need you to think very carefully. This isn't about family anymore. This is about national security. Are you absolutely certain, 100% certain, that no one else has been in this house in the last 12 hours? I opened my mouth to say yes. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that this was just my family being idiots, that the page was just stuck to the back of another one, or that it had fallen behind the sofa. But I remembered the open door. I remembered the key. "My sister," I said, my voice shaking. "My sister mentioned a visitor." Kendra dropped her water glass. It hit the rug with a dull thud, water soaking into the expensive wool. "A visitor?" The team leader turned on Kendra. He didn't shout. He moved closer, invading her personal space, his presence looming over her like a thunderhead. "Who?" "Nobody," Kendra squeaked. It was just a friend. He didn't come in. I swear. He just stood on the porch." "Who is he?" the team leader asked. "Miles," she whispered. "Miles Rourke." "And what does Miles do?" "He works in security," she said. "Private security. He is a good guy. He just came to get a sweater I borrowed. He was only here for a minute." "A minute?" the team leader repeated. "You are sure?" "Yes, maybe 5 minutes. I don't know." "Where were the documents when he was here?" "They were upstairs," Kendra cried. "In Luna's room. Locked up. He couldn't have seen them." "But you saw them," I said, looking at her. "You knew about the list." Kendra looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I told you. I just glanced at them this morning." The team leader ignored her. He tapped his earpiece. "Team 2, sweep the perimeter. I want a full dump of all surveillance cameras in a 3-block radius. Check for vehicles arriving between 2200 and 2300 hours last night. Team 3, get upstairs to the analyst's bedroom. Dust for prints on the door handle and the case." He looked at the agent by the front door. "Check the doorbell camera. Now." "Sir, the router is pulled," the agent said. "We cut the Wi-Fi. Pull the physical SD card from the doorbell unit," the team leader ordered. "If this house has a smart system, it has a local backup. Get it." I stood there, feeling the blood drain from my extremities. "Agent," I said, "if someone took that page, if they have the coordinates, then we are looking at a targeted extraction," he finished for me. "And your family just opened the door for them." The agent at the door returned with a small black chip in his hand. He inserted it into a ruggedized tablet. "Video is loading," he said. We gathered around the small screen, the team leader, me, and 2 other agents. Kendra sat in the chair, sobbing into her hands. The video started. The timestamp read, Friday, 22:14, 10:14 at night. The image was crisp, high-definition night vision. A car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a tactical vehicle. It was a nondescript gray sedan. A man got out. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. He didn't look like a delivery driver. He walked with a purpose. He didn't look at the house. He scanned the street, checking for witnesses. He walked up the path. He didn't ring the bell. He knocked, softly, 3 times. The door opened immediately. On the screen, my sister, Kendra, appeared. She was wearing her pajamas. She didn't hand him a sweater. She stepped back. She opened the door wide. The man stepped inside. "Pause," the team leader said. The image froze. The man was inside the foyer. Kendra was closing the door behind him. 7 minutes, the agent holding the tablet said, scrolling forward. "He exits at 22:21. We watched the exit. The man walked out. He was walking faster now. He wasn't holding a sweater. He was holding a stiff white envelope. He tucked it inside his jacket as he hurried down the path. "Zoom in on the exit," I said. Look at his hand. The agent pinched the screen. The image blurred, then sharpened. The envelope was thin, rectangular. That is it, the team leader said. His voice was ice. That is the asset. He turned to Kendra. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the wall, her face a mask of shock. You let him in, I said. It wasn't a question. He said he needed to use the bathroom, Kendra whispered. He said he drove a long way. He said he would just be a second. I stayed in the kitchen to make tea. I thought he was downstairs. He wasn't downstairs, the team leader said. He went upstairs. He had a key? No, Kendra said. But the spare key, it is in the mudroom, right next to the bathroom. The pieces fell into place with a sickening clarity. Miles Rourke knew who I was. He knew I was coming home. He knew my family's habits. He knew about the spare key. He had used Kendra, my sister, the nurse, the hero, as a Trojan horse to walk into a federal analyst's home and steal the blueprints to the eastern seaboard's power grid. Secure her, the team leader said, pointing to Kendra. She is a suspect. No, Kendra screamed as an agent grabbed her wrists. He is my boyfriend. He wouldn't do this. He loves me. He played you, the team leader said, and because of that, you just compromised national security. I looked out the window. Across the street, Mrs. Gable was standing on her porch, her phone held high, recording the black SUVs, the agents, the flashing lights. A few houses down, another neighbor was watching. The rumor mill had already started. The Cruz family is in trouble, big trouble, but they didn't know the half of it. We need to move, the team leader said, tapping his radio. Issue a bolo for Miles Rourke, gray sedan, armed and dangerous. He has the page. If he transmits those coordinates, we are looking at a cascading failure event within hours. He looked at me. Get your gear. Analyst, you are coming with us. We need to debrief you on exactly what was on that page. What about my family? I asked, looking at the empty hallway where my parents had been dragged away. Your family is currently under federal detention for obstruction and aiding a known hostile, he said. They are not going anywhere. I looked at the coffee table one last time. The basic work files label seemed to mock me. I walked out of the house, past the sobbing form of my sister, past the confused shouts of my father from the kitchen, and into the harsh light of the morning. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The house I had grown up in was gone. It was just a crime scene now. The transition from being the accuser to being the suspect is a subtle, terrifying shift in gravity. One moment, you are the person pointing at the evidence, demanding accountability. The next, the room goes quiet. The air gets thinner, and you realize that the finger of the state has rotated 180 degrees and is now pointing directly at your chest. I was separated from my family immediately, while they were ushered into the back of a transport van, bewildered and loud. I was placed in the back of a command vehicle. It was not a jail cell, but it was certainly not a guest room. It was a mobile tactical center, lined with screens and humming with the sound of cooling fans. I sat on a metal bench, my hands resting on my knees. I was not handcuffed, but I knew the protocol. I was in a gray zone. I was a federal asset who had potentially compromised national security, which meant I was dangerous until proven incompetent, or incompetent until proven malicious. An agent from the Office of Professional Responsibility sat across from me. He was a man I knew by reputation, Agent Miller. He was not a field operator. He was an auditor. He was the man who dissected careers with a scalpel. Analyst Cruz, Miller said. He didn't look up from his tablet. Let us review the chain of custody regarding the asset labeled basic work files. I have given my statement, I said. My voice sounded hollow in the cramped space. We are going to go through it again, Miller said, finally looking at me. His eyes were devoid of warmth. You stated that you secured the documents in a biometric hard case. That is correct, I said. And yet, Miller said, swiping a finger across his screen, the physical evidence suggests the secondary tumblers were not engaged. The latches were closed. Yes, but the internal locking mechanism was in the neutral position. Is that accurate? I felt a flush of shame heat my neck. I was distracted. My mother was calling me to dinner. I intended to secure it fully, but I rushed. It was a lapse in judgment. A lapse, Miller repeated. He let the word hang there, heavy and accusatory. You brought Tier 1 infrastructure schematics into a compromised environment, a residential home with unsecured Wi-Fi and frequent civilian foot traffic, and you experienced a lapse in judgment. Do you realize that this single lapse effectively nullifies your security clearance pending a full tribunal review? I was trying to work, I said, though I knew it sounded pathetic. The deadline was tight. Director Holloway authorized you to analyze the data, Miller cut in sharply. He did not authorize you to leave it accessible to your brother's Instagram feed or your sister's boyfriend. He tapped the screen again. Your remote access privileges have been suspended effective immediately. Your badge is deactivated. Your laptop has been seized for forensic imaging. We are currently auditing your last 6 months of travel, your financial records, and your communications. We need to rule out the possibility that this wasn't negligence. We need to rule out the possibility that you left that case open on purpose. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. That is insane. I am the one who called it in. I am the one who activated the beacon. Oh, Miller said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. You got caught, and you tried to control the narrative. That is what we are going to find out. Outside the vehicle. Through the tinted glass, I could see my family being transferred. The scene was a chaotic contrast to the sterile interrogation I was enduring. My brother, Dylan, was making a scene. He was struggling against the agents escorting him, his face twisted in a rictus of panic and rage. When he saw me through the window, or perhaps he just knew I was there, he screamed. The sound was muffled by the heavy glass, but the shape of the words was unmistakable. You ruined my life, he screamed. My clients, my reputation. You did this. Luna, you crazy bitch, you did this. He didn't see the black SUVs. He didn't see the tactical gear. He didn't see the missing page that could bring down a power grid. He only saw his own inconvenience. He saw the embarrassment. He saw the loss of his phone. I watched him being shoved into the van, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to apologize. I didn't feel the need to fix it for him. I felt a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't ruining his life. I was trying to stop a catastrophe that would ruin millions of lives. If his consulting career had to be the collateral damage for keeping the Eastern Seaboard running, then so be it. Miller watched me watching them. They do not understand the gravity, do they? No, I said softly. They think it is a game. They think boundaries are just suggestions. Well, Miller said, they are about to get a crash course in federal law. The door to the command vehicle opened, and a technician climbed in. He looked harried, sweating under his tactical vest. He was holding a ruggedized laptop. Sir, the technician said to Miller, we have a problem with the digital scrub. Report, Miller said. We seized the brother's phone, the tech said. We initiated the kill switch on the signal, but we were too late on the upload packet. My stomach dropped. How late? I asked. The tech looked at me, then at Miller. One image synchronized to the cloud at exactly 0900 hours. That was 12 minutes before the team breached the perimeter. What was the image? Miller asked. It is a high-resolution photograph of the table spread, the tech said, turning the laptop so we could see. There it was. My nightmare. Captured in 4,000 pixels, the coffee table, the sunlight, the scattered papers, and right in the center, clear as day, was page 3 of the addendum, the page with the frequency modulation codes. It is in the cloud, I whispered. It is worse than that, the tech said. We traced the sync path. It didn't just go to his personal backup. The router logs show a secondary push. As soon as the image hit the cloud, it was mirrored to an IP address that bounced through 3 proxy servers in Eastern Europe before vanishing. The silence in the van was absolute. That is not automatic backup, Miller said. That is an exfiltration script. Exactly, the tech said. Someone had a tap on that network. They were waiting for data. As soon as the brother took the picture, the script grabbed it. I leaned back against the cold metal wall of the van. The realization washed over me, chilling my blood. This wasn't just my family being nosy. This wasn't just Dylan being an idiot with a smartphone. The network was compromised before I even got there, I said, my mind racing. The blinking light on the router, it wasn't just uploading the photo, it was a tunnel. Your family, Miller said, looking at me with renewed intensity, didn't just violate your privacy, they walked you into a trap. Miles, I said. The name tasted like ash. Kendra's boyfriend. We are scrubbing him now, Miller said. But if he had access to the router, if he was in the house last night. He was, I said. He was in the house for 7 minutes. Miller tapped his earpiece. Get me the interview with the sister, now. We listened to the feed from the other interrogation room. Kendra was being questioned by 2 agents. Her voice was thin, reedy, laced with a panic that was starting to sound less like confusion and more like guilt. I told you, Kendra's voice crackled over the speaker. I don't know him that well. We met at a coffee shop near the hospital 3 months ago. He said he worked in corporate security. He was nice. He asked a lot of questions about Luna. He asked about your sister? The interrogator asked. He asked what she did, Kendra said. He said it sounded fascinating. I told him she was boring. I told him she just pushed papers. I wanted to talk about us, not her. Did you tell him she was coming home this weekend? There was a pause, a long, guilty silence. Yes, Kendra whispered. He asked if she ever brought work home. I told him she always carries that stupid heavy case. I was joking. I was just making fun of her. I closed my eyes. My own sister. She hadn't just opened the door. She had painted a target on my back. She had fed information to a predator because she wanted to feel interesting. She wanted to have a boyfriend who listened to her, even if he was only listening for the details of my security protocols. And last night? The interrogator pressed. When he came over? He texted me, Kendra said. He said he was in the neighborhood. He said he wanted to see me. I thought he was being romantic. He went upstairs, the interrogator said. You said he used the bathroom. Yes, Kendra sobbed. He was only gone for a few minutes. When he came down, he looked happy. He kissed me on the cheek. He said he had to go. Did he have anything with him? No, I didn't see anything. The feed cut out. Miller looked at me. She is lying, or she is in deep denial. She is in denial, I said. Kendra constructs her own reality. She cannot admit that the man she likes is a spy. It would break her narrative. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door of the command vehicle. An agent opened it and handed Miller a piece of paper. Message from the mother, the agent said. Passed through her attorney, who just arrived on scene. Miller read the note. His expression didn't change, but his eyebrows lifted slightly. He handed the paper to me. It was a handwritten note, scribbled on the back of a legal pad. Luna, please, talk to these men. Tell them who we are. Tell them I am your mother. You can fix this. Just tell them it was a mistake and make them let us go. I have a hair appointment at 2:00. This has gone on long enough. I stared at the note. I stared at the looping, cursive handwriting that I had seen on birthday cards and report cards my entire life. I have a hair appointment. She was sitting in federal custody, facing charges of espionage facilitation and obstruction of justice, and she was worried about her hair appointment. She still believed that her authority as a mother superseded the authority of the United States government. She still believed that I existed to serve her needs, to smooth over the rough edges of reality for her. She does not get it, I said, handing the note back to Miller. No, Miller said. She does not, and that makes her a liability. What happens to them? I asked. They are being processed, Miller said. We are charging them, Unlawful access to classified material, gross negligence. The brother is looking at distribution of national defense information. That carries a 10-year minimum if we decide to throw the book at him. And me? I asked. Miller looked at me for a long time. That depends on what we find on the camera footage from the doorbell. The tech team just finished enhancing the exit video. He turned the laptop toward me again. Watch. The video played. It was the same clip I had seen before, but the resolution had been upscaled. We saw Miles Rourke walking out of the front door. We saw him tucking something into his jacket. "Freeze it there," Miller commanded. The image froze. The tech zoomed in on the object in Miles's hand. It wasn't just a white envelope, as I had thought earlier. The enhancement showed the texture. It was stiff. It was heavy cardstock. And on the corner of the paper, just peeking out from under his thumb, was a faint, jagged line. It looked like a tear. "That is not an envelope," the tech said. "That is a page, a single page, folded once." I leaned in closer. The size was right. The color was right. "It is page 42, I said. The certainty settled in my chest like a stone. He didn't just take a photo. He took the physical key, which means, Miller said, closing the laptop with a snap, that he has the hard copy. He doesn't need to decrypt anything. He has the raw coordinates. He can target the grid manually, I said. He doesn't need to hack the system. He can just walk up to the substations listed on that page and bypass the physical locks, because the codes are printed right there." Miller stood up. The interrogation was over. The crisis was just beginning. "We are moving the perimeter," Miller said. "This is no longer a containment operation. It is a manhunt." He looked down at me. "You are coming with us to the field office. You are the only one who knows the layout of the grid sectors listed on that page. I am temporarily reinstating your advisory status, but do not mistake this for forgiveness. Cruz, once this is over, if there is a crater in the middle of Maryland, it is on your head." "I understand," I said. I stood up. My legs were numb. I walked out of the command vehicle and into the bright, blinding sunlight. I saw the van carrying my family pull away, surrounded by a police escort. I saw my mother's face pressed against the window, her mouth moving, probably still asking about her appointment. I turned away from them. I turned toward the waiting helicopter that had just landed on the neighbor's lawn, kicking up a storm of dust and grass. The investigation into my family was over. They were guilty of stupidity, but the investigation into the threat was just starting, and I was the only one who could stop the clock. The interrogation room at the field office was a stark, windowless box, painted in a shade of gray that seemed designed to drain the hope out of anyone sitting inside it. The air conditioning was humming at a low, aggressive frequency, keeping the temperature just cold enough to make shivering inevitable. I sat on one side of the metal table. My sister, Kendra, sat on the other. She looked small. That was the first thing that struck me. Kendra had always been the big sister, the loud one, the one with the nursing degree and the confident stride, and the stories about saving lives in the emergency room. Now, stripped of her scrubs and her self-righteousness, huddled in a borrowed oversized hoodie because her own clothes had been seized for forensic testing, she looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the shouting to start. Agent Miller stood in the corner, a silent sentinel. He wasn't interfering. He was letting me do the work. He knew that a federal interrogator can get a confession, but a sister can get the truth. "Who is he really, Kendra?" I asked. My voice was quiet, steady, devoid of the anger that was currently burning a hole through my stomach. Kendra sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "I told you, his name is Miles. He is a security consultant. He works for a firm in DRC. He is a good guy. Luna, he listens to me. He actually cares about what I say. He doesn't care about you," I said. The words were cruel, but they were necessary. I had to break the delusion before I could get the facts. "He cares about me, specifically. He cares about my clearance." "That is not true," Kendra snapped. a flash of her old defensive fire returning. Not everything is about you, Luna. God, you are so narcissistic. You think no one could possibly be interested in me just for me? You think I am that unlovable? I think you are very lovable, I said. But I think Miles Rourke is not a boyfriend. I think he is a handler, I signaled to Miller. He stepped forward and placed a file on the table. It wasn't a thin manila folder, it was a thick dossier, the kind that takes years to compile. Miles Rourke, Miller read aloud, his voice flat. Real name, Elias Thorne. Former private contractor for a defense firm in Northern Virginia. Terminated 4 years ago for multiple violations of data storage protocols. Suspected of selling proprietary algorithms to foreign bidders on the dark web. He has 3 aliases, 2 passports, and a bank account in the Cayman Islands that currently holds more money than you will make in 10 lifetimes. Kendra stared at the file. She didn't touch it. She looked at it as if it were a venomous snake. No, she whispered. He drives a Honda. He lives in a studio apartment. He told me he was saving up to start his own business. He drives a Honda to blend in, I said. He lives in a studio to avoid a footprint. And he was saving up. All right, he was saving up for the payday he got last night when he walked out of our parents' house with the locations of 50 critical infrastructure nodes in his pocket. Kendra looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know. I swear to God. Luna, I didn't know. I thought I was finally living for myself. You have your big career. Dylan has his money. I just wanted someone who chose me. He chose you, I said. Because you were the soft target. It was a brutal assessment, the kind of terminology we used in threat analysis. Not in family therapy, but the distinction between family and target had evaporated the moment Kendra opened the front door. Tell me about the timeline, I said. We need to know exactly how it happened. Miller showed me the video. You let him in at 10:14 at night. Why? He texted me, Kendra said, her voice shaking. He said he was in the area dropping off a client. He said he had been thinking about me all day. He asked if he could just stop by for 5 minutes to say hello. He said he needed to use the bathroom. And you let him in, I said. Mom and Dad were watching a movie in the den, Kendra explained. The volume was up. They didn't hear the door. I let him into the foyer. I kissed him. Then he asked where the restroom was. I pointed down the hall. But he said, is there one upstairs? I don't want to disturb your parents. I closed my eyes. It was such a classic social engineering tactic. Exploit the target's desire to be polite, to keep the secret, to be considerate. So you sent him upstairs, I said. Yes, I went to the kitchen to get him a glass of water. He came back down about 7 minutes later. He looked energized, happy. He drank the water, kissed me again, and left. And the door to my room? I asked. It was locked. I locked it before I went to sleep. How did he get in? Kendra went silent. She looked down at the metal table, tracing a scratch in the surface with her fingernail. Kendra, I said, leaning forward. This is the part that matters. How did he get into the room? I didn't give him a key, she said quickly. I know you didn't, I said, because you didn't have one. But someone unlocked that door. Was it you? No, she whispered. Then she paused. It was Mom. I felt the air leave my lungs. Mom? Earlier that evening, Kendra said, her voice barely audible. After you went to sleep, Mom was annoyed. She kept complaining that you were treating the house like a hotel. She said it was ridiculous that you were locking doors in your own family home. She said it was insulting. So she unlocked it, I said. She used the spare key from the mudroom, Kendra admitted. She went up there around 9:30. While you were asleep, she unlocked the door. She said, I am not going to let my daughter dictate the rules in my house. She didn't go in. She just unlocked it. She wanted to prove a point. She wanted to prove that she had access. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My mother's need for control, her inability to respect even the most basic physical boundary, had literally unlocked the door for a spy. She had compromised a federal asset to soothe her own ego. "So the door was unlocked," I said, piecing it together. "Miles goes upstairs. He tries the handle. It opens. He walks in while I am sleeping 5 feet away." The thought made my skin crawl. I had been asleep, vulnerable. A man I didn't know had been in my room, standing over me, breathing the same air, while he rifled through the case. "And the case?" I asked. "It was latched." "Miles is good with his hands," Kendra said weakly. "He showed me a magic trick once with a padlock. I thought it was just a party trick." "It wasn't a trick," Miller interjected from the corner. "It is a skill set. A standard bypass tool can open those commercial latches in 3 seconds if the secondary tumblers aren't engaged. And I hadn't engaged them. That was my sin. That was the 1 percentage point of negligence that Miles had exploited." "So," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and clarity. "Miles goes in. He opens the case. He sees the stack. He doesn't take the whole thing. That would be too obvious. He takes 1 page. The most important page. He folds it. He puts it in his pocket. He latches the case back up. He comes downstairs, drinks a glass of water, kisses you, and leaves." "And then," Kendra continued, her voice breaking, "the next morning, I saw the door was ajar. I told Dylan, we thought you left it open. We thought maybe you had relaxed. So we went in. We wanted to see what was in the folder. We brought it downstairs. We were just curious. Luna, we didn't know a page was missing. We thought the 52 pages were the whole thing." "You provided the cover," I said. "You and Dylan and Mom. You created the perfect smokescreen. If the team hadn't arrived, I might have thought I just lost the page. I might have thought you guys lost it. I never would have suspected an external extraction if the router hadn't flagged the upload." "I am sorry," Kendra sobbed. "I am so sorry, Luna." The door to the interrogation room opened. A senior investigator poked his head in. "We need you in the observation deck," he said to Miller. "We have the parents." Miller nodded to me. "Come on, you need to see this." We left Kendra weeping at the table and walked down the hall to a darkened room with a one-way mirror. Inside the brightly lit room on the other side sat my parents, Glenn and Marianne. They looked haggard. My father's shirt was untucked. My mother's makeup was smeared. They were sitting at a table across from 2 agents who looked very tired of listening to them. "I demand to speak to my lawyer again," my father was shouting. "This is entrapment. You have no right to hold us. We are victims here." "Mr. Cruz," the agent said calmly, "we have established that your wife unlocked the secure room. We have established that your daughter, Kendra, allowed the hostile actor entry. We have established that your son, Dylan, uploaded classified imagery to an unsecured server. You are not victims. You are accomplices." "Accomplices?" my mother shrieked. "We are family. Luna brought those papers into our house. If she hadn't brought them home, none of this would have happened. It is her fault." I stood behind the glass. Watching them, I watched the people who had raised me, the people who claimed to love me, throw me under the bus without a second of hesitation. "Did you hear that?" Miller asked quietly. "I heard it," I said. "It is a common psychological defense," Miller said. "Displacement. They cannot accept that their actions, unlocking a door, inviting a stranger, taking a photo, caused a national security crisis, so they blame the origin point. They blame you for existing in their space. If I hadn't brought it home," I repeated their words. "Technically, they are right. If I had stayed at the office, the files would be safe." "If you had stayed at the office," Miller corrected, "you would have been safe from them. But you didn't. You trusted them, and they failed that trust. That is not a crime. Luna, that is just a tragedy." I looked at my mother through the glass. She was leaning forward, her face twisted in that familiar expression of self-righteous indignation. "She knows better," my mother was saying to the agent. She knows we are curious people. She should have hidden it better. She left it there to tempt us. She wanted this to happen so she could feel superior. I turned away from the glass. I couldn't look at them anymore. The bond was severed. It wasn't cut by the federal charges or the handcuffs. It was cut by that sentence. She wanted this to happen. "We have a hit on the car," a voice called out from the main control room behind us. Miller and I rushed out to the floor. A large screen on the wall was displaying a map of Maryland. A red dot was moving rapidly along the interstate corridor. "Traffic camera picked up the gray sedan," the tech officer shouted. "Heading south on I-95. He is moving fast, 80 miles per hour. "He is heading for the drop," I said, staring at the map. "Look at the vector. He is not going to the airport. He is going to the bridge." "The bridge?" Miller asked. "Page 42, I said, my mind racing through the photographic memory of the document. The third entry on the list, the Francis Scott Key Bridge support pylons. There is a blind spot in the sensor grid at pylon 4. If he physically plants a transmitter there, he can override the dampeners manually. He is not selling the data, Miller realized. He is using it. He is the actor, I said. The sale was a cover. He is going to execute the attack himself. "Time to intercept?" Miller barked at the team. "He is 20 minutes out," the tech said. "We can get a chopper there in 10, but ground units are stuck in traffic." "Get the chopper," Miller ordered. "And get me a direct line to the bridge authority. We need to shut it down." He turned to me. "You know the layout of the pylons?" "I wrote the assessment on them," I said. "Then you are coming," Miller said. "We need someone to identify the breach point before he triggers it." "What about Miles?" I asked. "If he is on that bridge with the intent to destroy critical infrastructure," Miller said grimly, checking his sidearm, "then he is classified as an imminent threat. We are not going to ask him for his ID." I looked back at the interrogation room door where Kendra was sitting. I thought about her boyfriend speeding down the highway, ready to kill thousands of people to prove a point or make a paycheck. "Let's go," I said. As we ran toward the helipad, my phone buzzed in my pocket, the personal one they had returned to me. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from Dylan, sent from the burner phone his lawyer had probably given him. "This is all your fault. Fix it." I shoved the phone back into my pocket. "I am fixing it," I whispered to the roar of the helicopter blades. "But not for you." The family drama was over. The war had begun. The only thing that mattered now was getting to pylon 4 before the man my sister loved turned the Chesapeake Bay into a graveyard. The fallout of a national security breach does not happen all at once like an explosion. It happens in slow, agonizing waves, like radiation poisoning. The initial shock of the raid, the shouting agents, and the helicopters fades. But what follows is a silent, creeping destruction that eats away at everything you thought was permanent. In the 48 hours following the extraction of the files from my parents' home, the Cruz family ceased to be a family and became a case number. My father, Glenn, and my mother, Marianne, were released on a bond that cost more than the equity in their beloved house. They were confined to the residence, stripped of their passports, and fitted with ankle monitors that blinked a relentless, accusatory green light. The charges against them were heavy: unauthorized access to classified material, obstruction of a federal investigation, conspiracy to violate the Espionage Act. They were not spies. They were just arrogant, boundary-stomping suburbanites. But in the eyes of the law, negligence that aids the enemy is indistinguishable from malice. Dylan faced a darker reality. Because he had taken the photograph, and because that photograph had synchronized to a server now confirmed to be monitored by hostile actors, he was charged with the transmission of national defense information. It is a charge usually reserved for defectors and traitors. He was looking at a mandatory minimum of 10 years in federal prison. The social execution was swift. Cedar Hollow is a small place, and news of a Homeland Security raid travels faster than a virus. By Monday morning, the neighbors who used to wave at my father as he mowed the lawn were crossing the street to avoid walking past our house. Mrs. Gable, the neighbor who had recorded the raid, had posted the video online. It had 2 million views. The comments section was a cesspool of speculation. People called my father a sleeper agent. They called my mother a terrorist sympathizer. They called our home a terror cell. The church group that my mother had led for 15 years sent a polite email informing her that her services were no longer required. They cited the disruption to the spiritual harmony of the congregation. It was a polite way of saying they didn't want the FBI sitting in the pews on Sunday. Dylan's career imploded before the ink on his indictment was dry. His branding consultancy relied entirely on reputation. When his clients, mostly mid-tier tech startups and lifestyle brands, saw his mugshot on the evening news, they didn't just fire him. They sued him for breach of contract. He went from projecting a net worth of $200,000 to being legally insolvent in the span of an afternoon. Kendra fared no better. The hospital board placed her on indefinite administrative leave pending an internal investigation. A nurse who invites a known domestic terrorist into her home, even unknowingly, is considered a liability. Her access to patient records was revoked. Her badge was deactivated. The job she had built her entire identity around was gone. Suspended in the amber of suspicion, but the most painful fallout was directed at me. I was the whistleblower. I was the one who had made the call. And in the twisted logic of my extended family, that made me the villain. My phone, which had been returned to me after a forensic scrub, became a repository for hate. My aunts, uncles, and cousins, people I had spent Christmases with, people whose babies I had held, sent me messages that dripped with venom. How could you do this to your parents? You chose a paycheck over your own blood. I hope you are happy now that you have destroyed them. I was removed from the family group chat. It seems like a small thing, a petty digital slight, but in the modern world, it is an act of exile. I was erased from the collective consciousness of the Cruz clan. There would be no more birthday invites, no more Thanksgiving dinners. I was the pariah. I was the daughter who turned her family into the wolves. They did not understand that I had not turned them in. I had saved them from being the epicenter of a mass casualty event. But facts do not matter when pride is wounded. While my family was busy demonizing me, the investigation into Miles Rourke, or Elias Thorne, or whatever name he was using that day, took a turn that validated my worst fears. The manhunt was aggressive. We had missed him at the bridge by minutes. The helicopter had spotted his vehicle, but he had abandoned it under an overpass and switched to a secondary transport. He was a ghost, a professional who knew how to vanish, but he had made a mistake. In his haste to upload the coordinates from page 42 to his buyers, he had pinged a server that the NSA had been watching for months. 3 days after the raid, Agent Miller pulled me into a briefing room at the field office. He looked exhausted. He had bags under his eyes dark enough to carry groceries. "We hit a warehouse in Baltimore this morning," Miller said, sliding a tablet across the table. "Based on the digital trail from your brother's upload." "Did you find Miles?" I asked. "No," Miller said. "He is still in the wind, but we found his safe house, and we found his backup drives." He tapped the screen. A series of images appeared. They were not just photos of my files. They were photos of blueprints for water treatment plants in Ohio, flight control schematics for Atlanta, Port Authority rosters for Seattle. "He wasn't just targeting the bridge," Miller said grimly. "Miles isn't a lone wolf with a grudge. He's a broker. He is a mid-level node in a trafficking ring that specializes in critical infrastructure data. He steals it, or he buys it, and he sells it to the highest bidder on the dark web." I felt a chill run through me. "So my family—" "Your family was just a job," Miller said. "He targeted Kendra because she was a nurse. Nurses are empathetic. They are tired. They are looking for connection. He profiled her, he courted her, and he waited for the opportunity." "And the photo Dylan took?" I asked. "We found a transaction log on the server," Miller said. "That photo, the one showing the frequency codes, was sold 17 minutes after it was uploaded. The buyer's IP, traces back to a state-sponsored hacking group known for ransomware attacks on utility grids. It was sold, I whispered. He didn't just steal the page. He sold the digital copy my brother provided. Yes, Miller said, which means even though we recovered the physical page from his abandoned car, the data is out there. Your brother didn't just take a souvenir. He minted a weapon. This was the proof. This was the vindication. My family wasn't innocent. They weren't victims of a misunderstanding. They were the unwitting accomplices to a global crime syndicate. I requested to speak to Kendra. She was being held in a witness detention room. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. The defiance was gone. The nurse who could command an ER was replaced by a woman who looked broken by the weight of her own choices. I sat down across from her. I didn't say anything at first. I just laid the photo of the server farm on the table. He was selling it all. Kendra, I said softly. Water, power, air traffic, and us. Kendra picked up the photo. Her hands were trembling so hard the paper shook. I didn't know, she whispered. It was the same refrain she had used for days. I know you didn't know, I said. But you didn't look. You didn't ask. You were so desperate for him to be real that you ignored every red flag. You let a stranger walk through our home because it felt good to be wanted. Kendra looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. I just wanted to be happy. Luna, you have your important job. Dylan has his money. I just wanted someone. And because you wanted someone, I said, thousands of people are at risk. For the first time, Kendra didn't argue. She didn't blame me. She didn't talk about her rights. She slumped back in her chair, and the reality of it seemed to crush the breath out of her. I opened the door, she said. Her voice was flat, dead. I brought the bad guy in. I made tea for him. I kissed him. Yes, I said. You did. I am the reason Mom and Dad are in handcuffs, she said. Yes, I said. She buried her face in her hands and wept. It wasn't the crying of a victim anymore. It was the crying of someone who finally understands the cost of their own naivety. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. I left her there. There was nothing else to say. When I got back to my temporary desk, there was a large manila envelope waiting for me. It had been cleared by the mail screening unit. The return address was my parents' house. It was a letter from my mother. I opened it with dread. I expected hate. I expected guilt. I expected a demand for me to recant my testimony. The handwriting was shaky. My mother had always prided herself on her perfect penmanship. But this looked like it had been written by someone whose hands wouldn't stop shaking. Luna, the lawyer says we are not allowed to talk to you. He says it could damage our defense. But I have to write this. Your father is not eating. He just sits by the window and watches the street. He thinks the neighbors are laughing at him. They are. I am angry. Luna, I am so angry at you. You brought this world into our home. You brought those secrets. If you had just been a teacher, or a doctor, or anything normal, we would be having a barbecue this weekend. But last night, the agents came back to search the house again. They tore apart the attic. They tore apart your old room, and one of them, he told me what was on that page. He told me what happens if the grid goes down. He told me about the hospitals losing power. He told me about the ventilators stopping. I thought you were just playing a game. I thought you were trying to be special. I thought the lock on your door was just you being difficult. I did not know. Luna, I did not know why you were so scared all the time. I thought you were weak. I thought you were paranoid. But you were not scared for yourself, were you? I am still angry. I will never forgive you for letting them take Dylan. But for the first time, I think I'm scared too. Mom, I put the letter down. It wasn't an apology. Narcissists don't apologize. They reframe. But it was an admission. It was the first crack in the armor of Marianne Cruz. She finally understood that my fear wasn't a personality flaw. It was a professional necessity. Cruz, Miller's voice cut through my thoughts. I looked up. He was standing at the door of the bullpen. He wasn't alone. Director Holloway was with him. Holloway never came down to the field office. If Holloway was here, the situation had escalated from crisis to catastrophe. "Sir," I said, standing up. "Walk with us," Holloway said. We walked down the hallway to the SCIF, the real one this time, with the lead-lined walls and the air that smelled of ozone. Holloway closed the heavy door and locked it. He turned on the sound dampeners. "The sale of the frequency codes is confirmed," Holloway said. "We have chatter from the buyer. They are not waiting. They are planning to deploy the exploit." "When?" I asked. "Soon," Holloway said. "We have patched the digital vulnerability on the main grid, but the physical bypass, the one Miles Rourke identified, that is still open. The hardware at the substations is 40 years old. We cannot patch it remotely. It has to be manually reconfigured." "We have teams deploying," Miller said. "But we have a problem. The schematics on page 42. They are non-standard. The wiring diagrams don't match the current municipal records. They are legacy systems from the Cold War era." Holloway looked at me. "You are the analyst who flagged the anomaly. You are the one who pulled the archive files. You are the only one who has studied the original 1982 blueprints in depth." "I memorized them," I said. "I spent 6 hours staring at them before the incident," Holloway finished. "Yes. We need you to go to the primary node," Holloway said. "We need you to guide the engineering team on the ground. If they cut the wrong wire, they trip the failsafe and black out the entire mid-Atlantic region. If they don't cut it in time, the hackers get in and do the same thing." "Me?" I asked. "I am under investigation. My clearance is suspended." "Your clearance is reinstated," Holloway said. "Provisional status. You are the only asset we have who knows the terrain. You brought this mess to your doorstep. Cruz, now you are going to help us sweep it up." I thought about my family. I thought about Dylan in his cell, wondering why his brand couldn't save him. I thought about my father staring out the window at a world that hated him. I thought about Kendra weeping for a love that was a lie. They were broken. My home was gone. My name was mud. But the grid was still standing, the lights were still on, and as long as I had breath in my body, I was going to keep them on. "I am ready," I said. "Good," Holloway said. "Get your gear. We are leaving now." I grabbed my jacket. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't look at the letter from my mother. I walked out of the room, leaving the wreckage of my personal life behind, and stepped back into the war. The conference room at the federal courthouse did not smell like justice. It smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. We were seated around a table that was too long and too wide, designed to make intimacy impossible. On one side sat my family and their team of expensive defense attorneys. On the other side sat the federal prosecutors. I sat in the middle, alone, a witness for the state who happened to share a bloodline with the defendants. This was the moment the illusion finally died. For days, my father had been blustering about rights and misunderstandings. My mother had been fretting about her social calendar. Dylan had been whining about his lost followers, but as the lead prosecutor, Mr. Henderson, opened his binder, the air in the room shifted. It became heavy, suffocatingly real. "We are not here to negotiate the facts," Henderson said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who held all the cards. "We are here to discuss how much time your clients will serve." My father's lawyer, a man who charged $600 an hour, leaned forward. "Now, hold on. My clients are upstanding citizens. This was a domestic dispute that got out of hand. There was no intent to distribute. Intent is irrelevant regarding the negligence charges," Henderson countered. "But let us talk about intent, specifically. Let us talk about Mrs. Cruz." My mother straightened up, clutching her purse. "Me? I told you. I just unlocked the door to get laundry. I was being a mother." Henderson signaled to his assistant, who played a recording. It was a phone call. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. It was my mother talking to her friend, Mrs. Gable, the same neighbor who had filmed the raid. "I am telling you, Susan, Luna is practically running the government." She acts so secretive, but I know she is working on the big infrastructure projects. She brings these files home. Huge files. I'm going to get a look at them one of these days, just to prove she isn't the only one who knows what is going on. My daughter is important, which means I am important. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. "You didn't unlock that door for laundry," Henderson said, looking directly at my mother. "You unlocked it because you had already bragged that you could. You created a vulnerability because you wanted social currency. And word got around. Miles Rourke didn't just pick Kendra out of a crowd. He picked her because you, Mrs. Cruz, had been painting a target on your house for months at the country club." My mother's face crumbled. The laundry lie. The "I just wanted to understand you" lie. It all dissolved. She hadn't wanted to understand me. She had wanted to own me. She wanted to claim my clearance as her own personal achievement. "I didn't know," she whispered. But this time, nobody believed her. Then, the focus turned to Dylan. A technical expert from the NSA stood up. He projected an image onto the wall. It was the photo Dylan had taken. "Mr. Cruz," the expert said, "you claimed this was just a picture of paper, a boring picture." "It was," Dylan insisted, though his voice was thin. "It is just lines." "This is not a line," the expert said, pointing to a specific jagged vector on the schematic. "This is a kinetic bypass protocol. By uploading this single image, you provided a hostile entity with the exact frequency needed to overheat a transformer from 500 miles away. You didn't just take a picture, you handed a loaded gun to a person standing in a crowded room." Dylan stared at the screen for the first time. The arrogance that defined him, the belief that the world was just content for his feed, vanished. He saw the math. He saw the danger. He realized that his need for a viral moment had almost caused a literal firestorm. Dylan choked up. Tears began to stream down his face. They weren't the angry tears of a child caught stealing cookies. They were the terrified tears of a man realizing he is the villain of the story. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." "That is why we are offering a plea," Henderson said coldly. "If you had meant to do it, we would be seeking 20 years. As it is, we are seeking 18 months. 18 months? My father gasped. "In prison? He is a boy." "He is 26 years old," Henderson said, "and he is dangerous." The plea deal was signed an hour later. There was no more fighting. The weight of the federal government is not something you fight when they have your voice on tape and your fingerprints on the crime scene. The sentencing hearing 2 weeks later was a formality, but it felt like a funeral. My parents were sentenced to 3 years of probation and 6 months of house arrest. They were ordered to pay a fine of $50,000 each to cover the cost of the emergency response. They were also placed on a federal watch list that effectively banned them from air travel for the next 5 years. Dylan was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security federal facility for the transmission of national defense information. He was also permanently banned from using any internet-connected device without supervision for 5 years after his release. His digital life, his brand, his followers, his identity, was legally deleted. As for Miles Rourke, the man who had started it all, he didn't get a plea deal. He was arrested at a marina in Delaware, trying to sell the physical copy of Page 42 to a contact from a foreign intelligence service, based on the intelligence I had provided regarding the bridge pylons. The FBI was able to intercept the transaction. Miles gave up his entire network to avoid the death penalty. His confession confirmed everything I had warned about. They were days away from a coordinated attack on the eastern power grid. I had been right. I had been right about everything, but being right felt incredibly cold. After the sentencing, I walked out to the parking lot. The sun was shining, indifferent to the wreckage of my family. My father was standing by his car. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. He wasn't the king of the castle anymore. He was a convict on probation. He looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a profound, bewildering distance. "I do not recognize you," he said. His voice was quiet. "I look at you, and I do not see my daughter. I see a government agent. I do not recognize you either. Dad, I said. I thought you were the protector of the family, but you just wanted to be the boss. You didn't protect us. You exposed us. I am your father, he said, as if that title still held the magical weight it once did. I know, I said, but I still had to be right, because if I was wrong, people would have died. He got into the car without another word. My mother didn't even look at me. She was staring straight ahead, lost in a world where she could no longer pretend everything was perfect. I stood there, watching them drive away. I was an orphan with living parents. Luna, I turned. Kendra was standing there. She wasn't going to prison, but she had lost her license to practice nursing for at least 2 years pending a review. She looked tired. Are you okay? I asked. No, she said. She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I am definitely not okay. I lost my job. I lost my boyfriend, who turned out to be a spy. I lost my family. You didn't lose me, I said. I am still here. Kendra looked at me. Her eyes were searching my face for something she could recognize. I hate you, she said softly. I flinched. I hate you because you were right, she continued, her voice trembling. I hate that you saw him for what he was when I only saw what I wanted to see. I hate that you were the strong one. She took a step closer. But I hate myself more, she whispered, because I was wrong, and because I unlocked the door. It was the most honest thing any member of my family had said to me in 30 years. Call me, I said, when you are ready. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and walked away to her own car. I went back to work. I didn't get a parade. I didn't get a public ceremony. In the intelligence community, victories are silent. I was called into Director Holloway's office. He handed me a single sheet of paper. It was a citation for the Distinguished Service Award. It would never be published. It would go into my personnel file, seen only by people with top-secret clearance. Good work, Cruz, Holloway said. You followed protocol. You initiated containment. You stopped the threat. Thank you, sir, I said. However, he added, due to the nature of the breach, your remote work privileges are permanently revoked. You are considered a high-value target now. You work in the building, behind the wire, from now on. I understand, I said. I didn't mind. I didn't want to take work home anymore. Home was no longer a sanctuary. 1 year passed. The seasons changed. I moved to a new apartment in D.C., a place with a doorman and steel core doors. I didn't visit Cedar Hollow. I didn't celebrate Thanksgiving. I worked. I slept. I survived. On a rainy Tuesday evening in November, my buzzer rang. I checked the monitor. A man was standing in the lobby. He was wearing a cheap jacket and carrying a duffel bag. His hair was shorter than I remembered. He looked thinner, harder. It was Dylan. He had been released 3 days ago. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the button. I could leave him there. I could leave him in the rain. He had mocked me. He had exposed me. He had hated me. But he was also the boy I had taught to ride a bike. He was the brother who had been crushed by his own vanity and rebuilt by 18 months in a federal cell. I pressed the button. Come up, when I opened my apartment door. He was standing there, dripping wet. He didn't have his phone. He didn't have his swagger. He looked like a refugee from a war he had started. Hi, he said. His voice was rough. Hi, I said. He looked at me, then looked down at his cheap shoes. I do not have anywhere else to go. Mom and Dad, they are drowning in their own misery. I can't be in that house. Why did you come here? I asked. He looked up. His eyes were clear. The cloud of narcissism was gone, burned away by the reality of consequence. I am not here to ask you to save me, he said. I know you can't, and I know you shouldn't. Then what do you want? I want you to teach me, he said. Teach you what? How to live with it, Dylan said. You live with the weight of things every day. You carry secrets. You carry consequences. I never carried anything heavier than a tablet. Now I am carrying a felony. I am carrying the guilt, and I don't know how to do it." I looked at him. I saw the change. He wasn't asking for a handout. He was asking for a lesson in survival. I stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come inside," I said. "Dry off." He stepped over the threshold. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet," I said, closing the heavy steel door and locking it. All 3 locks. One by one. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was loud and final. We have a lot of work to do. My family had broken the world to see what was inside. Now, we were going to spend the rest of our lives gluing it back together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please subscribe to the channel Monica Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.